Going guys, I'm James and I'm back with a new video. So I just recorded the other video. It's uploading as I speak. So I wanted to make another video kind of regarding my current language journey, but this is going to be more of a topical method video. So I want to talk about the new language I had started. I'm not counting Russian and Spanish as new languages since I've studied them before, but I wanted to talk about me learning Uzbek. So I wanted to talk about this because I want to kind of make this a video to help other people possibly to learn languages they're interested in. So a lot of times I've seen people who want to learn certain languages such as, let me move my mic so hopefully you can hear me. A lot of time I see people wanting to learn certain languages, that just don't have a lot of material for them. I don't have any great examples. It may be certain local languages of a language, or of a country, or it may be just any language that just didn't get much attention. It's a learned language, that isn't like Japanese or Spanish or French or something. But like I said, I've been studying Uzbek, which isn't very commonly studied, by people, and I'm not going to get really into the reasons why I'm studying Uzbek either. I cover that in the video I'm uploading right now, which will be my previous video. Instead, I want to talk about how I'm studying Uzbek. As you can guess, finding any type of material to learn Uzbek has been pretty difficult. I've tried, I've used Memrise quite a bit, and I'll get to that. I actually do use Memrise, but vocabulary is just one part of the equation when it comes to learning a language. As you know, I usually don't put much emphasis on grammar, or I don't put much emphasis on learning grammar. I prefer a naturalistic way of learning it, or the comprehensible method, or comprehensible input method, like Stephen Kaufman and Stephen Krashen teach. But I'm going to cover how I'm learning that with Uzbek. So to go ahead and clarify, just so I don't have any misconceptions later, Uzbek grammar isn't completely new for me. Even though I'm very bad at Turkish, I have studied a little bit of Turkish before, just to a basic, barely even beginner knowledge. And, but even the little bit of Turkish I know, it's given me an idea of what the grammar structure is like, how some of the affixes or suffixes work in Uzbek, because it's similar between them. They're from the same language family. And, because of this, I did have a little bit of a head start in Uzbek, even some with vocabulary. Not a very significant boost in vocabulary, but some. And so basically, finding material for me to learn Uzbek with has been very scarce. So I kind of hinted at this in the previous video. I wanted to share what I'm doing to learn this language, and the title of this video is about learning rare languages, or languages with no material for it. Rare may not be the best word for it, but anyways, so obviously the first thing I wanted to figure out when I started learning Uzbek was vocabulary and grammar. That's what we need to speak, is we need vocabulary so we can talk on different subjects, and we need the grammar to be able to put these words into a meaningful context to be able to communicate. Obviously I can't just use English grammar with Uzbek, because not only is it different vocabulary, it's a whole completely way of thinking, and it's a whole different grammar. I can't English we speak with the subject, verb, and the object, but in Uzbek it's SOV, subject, object, verb, and it doesn't just end there. You can't just switch the word order. You have to think in the language. You have to talk the way they do. Uzbek is an agglutinative language, which means they make more meaning from their words by attaching suffixes and even putting suffixes on their suffixes. and we don't really do that in English. We'll use maybe one suffix or one, we usually just use one of each, like we don't really pile up suffixes in English like that. So that's a whole nother way of thinking in this language as well. So I know I'm kind of talking about the difficulties of it, and I need to just get to how I'm doing it. So there's a few ways you can go about it. So the first way I'd say is it's the most indirect way, but I'm giving the most direct answer. So this isn't going to be just my answer and be done with it, of course. It's just I wanted to give one of the more like direct answers, or direct. It's a direct indirect approach. You're going very indirect at learning this, at your learning the language you want to, but my answer is direct, like I said. And what I mean is, say for example you're like me and you want to learn, say, Uzbek or Kazakh, that doesn't have very much material for it at the moment. What you can do is you can study a language, say Turkish, that has more material for it. And I know Turkish isn't exactly, it didn't have exactly a bunch of material either, but it has a lot more than these other languages do. So obviously that's a way, you can, kind of give yourself a door into these languages, is find a language that's similar, study that first, and then go to the next one. I know a lot of people when they study Arabic, obviously with the MSA, Modern Standard Arabic, FUSA, a lot of people study the Modern Standard Arabic first before they ever study any dialect, because, there's usually, imagine there's more material for Modern Standard Arabic than there is for the dialects. And studying the Modern Standard Arabic is kind of like giving yourself a gateway into this language community, even though people don't really speak Modern Standard Arabic outside of formal context, like literature or news maybe. It's really, you're familiarizing yourself with the pattern still, and you have a foundation from where you can start in these other dialects of Arabic. And it's the same, I think, when it comes to learning other languages, like, it's kind of like the Romance languages. If you learn Spanish, then French is going to be easier, and vice versa. And I think you can do that, but of course that's not always possible. There's language isolates, there's languages where the other similar languages are just as hard to find material for. That's kind of similar to my case right now with Uzbek. So that was the indirect, direct approach, as I called it. And not a lot of people, it may not appeal to people, because basically you're not even getting into the language you're wanting to learn. You're learning a whole nother language. And so what I really want to talk about is just going straight at the language, which is probably what you're here for. And sorry it's taken me 8 minutes to get to the point. I'll probably put a timestamp in the comments and description, one or the other, so people can skip all the blabbering. But what I wanted to talk about though is how I'm studying Uzbek. So anyways, for Uzbek, I'm basically, because there isn't much material for it, I'm having to, of course I'm using what I can find. I have found some vocabulary and phrase decks. There actually is one website that does have material for Uzbek, which has been very good. It just hasn't been very convenient. But I want to talk about though how I'm creating my own material for Uzbek. So you're probably thinking, how can you make material in a language you don't know? And a lot of people, when they hear my answer, they're probably going to scoff at me and be like, oh, this is a bad way of learning languages, So basically what I'm doing is I'm translating from English to Uzbek. And I'm using, of course, Google to do my translating. It's been the best translator out of the ones I've tried. I've used another translator and it just didn't work. It didn't translate well. And so basically, like I said, I've just been translating things that I wanted to learn into Uzbek. So I talked about Memrise earlier. I actually do have one Memrise deck that I didn't create. Somebody else had made it, and I've been using it because it's from an actual course, I believe. And basically, it's coming from someone who's qualified to teach the language, the material I'm using. So, that's of course better than what I'm doing. It's more fact checked, and I know it's weird for me to say that I can notice errors in a language I don't know, but there has been a few errors, but it's kind of leading into what I wanted to talk about. So basically, I've been using Google Translate to make vocab decks, phrase decks, with example sentences, and just basic phrases, like hello, how are you, good morning, things like that. And, you're probably thinking, no, stay away from Translate. It's a lot of people, they don't like using Google Translate because it gives bad translations, and obviously that's going to happen at some point with a translator. Translators aren't perfect, but it kind of comes back to what we're saying. I mean, we're learning languages that there's no material for, at least if I assume that's why you're here. And we kind of have to take what we can get. And the second point, and I'll come back to this first point, but the second point I wanted to talk about is, I know it may be hard, but try to find someone who speaks the language you're interested in. So you're probably thinking, okay, I'm wanting to learn this language, but there's no way I'm going to find a native speaker in my country. And this is where we have to take advantage of the resources we have, one of these being the internet. And I know this isn't anything mind-blowing. You're like, yes, I know that. And, the best place to look I've found is on language exchange apps like HelloTalk or Tandem. I really recommend these apps because those are the best way, I think, to find language partners, especially somebody to teach you the language. Now, obviously, using these apps, it comes with the expectation that you're going to help them as well with your native language. There's also apps like Italki, language tutoring apps. If money isn't an issue and you can find a tutor for your language, then that's even better, because then you can spend all your time just on learning that language. But, that's probably not possible, Some languages don't have tutors on apps like Italki. But try to find you a native, because the native's going to help you with your grammar questions when you have them, the specific questions. And they're also, they're just going to, if you have doubts about something, that you learn, you can ask them, they can tell you. And, any connection to a native speaker is just going to be good for your language learning. And it kind of does go against what me and a lot of other YouTubers always agree upon, is whether we should or have output from the beginning, whether we should speak from the beginning. And normally I'd say no, but and it's your choice, but normally I say no, we shouldn't output from the beginning, that much at least. But when it comes to learning a rare language, you kind of have to, unless they're just they just have really good English or whatever your native language is, or unless you just meet someone who just doesn't want to use your language, or not your language, sorry, just didn't want to speak in their language, you may have to output at the beginning, which is just something you're going to have to cure with more immersion. So, you're probably thinking, okay, so I'm learning words, but that didn't teach me the grammar. And I mentioned earlier that I made phrase decks, or example sentences. And obviously this isn't going to be foolproof either. Sorry, I can't speak. But one thing I've been doing for Uzbek is I've just been writing out, basic sentences, nothing too complicated, just basic sentences that are showing off certain grammatical things that I want to be able to say. And I know this isn't perfect because it's basically translating from a language to another. It's not translating or making sentences with the mind of a native of that language. And if your partner is willing to write out sentences in the language and translate them back to English, then that's better, because now they're being taught with a native, not by you, with your native mindset. But, like I said, usually I will say, usually a lot of basic sentences aren't that different, and the translator can deal with basic sentences, like I eat an apple or things. We're not trying to think of, like, obviously if you know anything about language learning, you're not going to be typing, English idioms into Translate, because obviously they don't use the same idioms as us. But the goal is you just want to have these sentences that you can play back over and over and over to kind of ingrain these basic structures in your mind. And however you choose to go about getting these sentences, whether you write them yourself or you get a native to write them, is up to you and how much effort you're willing to put into doing that. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, is I've just been writing basic sentences. I write some sentences that are about, like, I'm wanting to learn how to conjugate in different, or how verbs work in different tenses, in the Uzbek. Then I'll write general questions that I need to know, like, things like how much is the car, or what time do you wake up, or basic question words, or phrases, because a lot of times we use these same patterns, we just change the words in it. So basically what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to think of all these conversational sentences that you think you would use frequently, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something you would use. You just want the general pattern of the sentence. Like, I don't say, for example, I don't say I want to buy a car every day, because I'm not rich and I'm not out there buying cars, but that's a general pattern though that we use a lot. I want to buy supper tonight, or I want to buy food, or I want to buy a new video game. You're just learning the patterns and the sentence structures. And what I've been doing is so I started out learning just vocabulary on its own, and if you want to go through the hassle of making sentence cards with your vocabulary, then that's good, and that's a better way of checking the accuracy. One problem with translators sometimes, especially the verbs, a lot of times in English, we have nouns that are the same as a verb. Like for example, in English we have the noun show, like a TV show, but that same word show can also mean the verb to show, and Translate doesn't always pick up on that. I was trying to translate the word show into Uzbek, and I meant the noun, but it thought I meant the verb to show. And the more you start getting into the language and you start kind of picking up on the grammar and things, you will start kind of noticing these translation mistakes more as you start learning how suffixes work, things like that. And it happens quicker than you would think. And of course you can get textbooks, I'm not saying don't get them, it's just about using what you can get, So basically how I study these, though, the words and the phrases, is I've been using Memrise, and you're free to use whatever you want. I just use Memrise because it's a lot of repetition of these phrases, so it's more a chance to, get it ingrained in your mind. So basically I put these in the Memrise. If you don't know, Memrise is basically a flashcard app, and I just review these sentences. The purpose, I don't try to memorize them. I'm just trying to make my own immersion, or sentence mining deck, if you want to call it that, into these languages. So, I'm doing this. I'm, reviewing these sentences, adding more words, and the more words, you're basically, giving yourself more opportunity to basically, understand. And the more you understand, by principle, like Stephen Krashen says, the more you're going to be able to learn, as you start getting into actual content. And it's kind of like people like Matt versus Japan and others have said, like, the goal, this isn't meant to take you to like any type of big level of fluency all you're wanting to do is get to a level where you can start understanding normal native written content, because once you get to that level, I mean, you're good. You don't have to create your own content anymore. You can start listening to news, movies, and music if you can find it, just things written by natives. And then you're going to be getting actual native content that isn't as prone to error. And I may link in the description some apps, that I think are good for learning rare languages. I don't know if I'll do it tonight, but I'll put it in the comments or in the description. And I think they're pretty good. The sad thing is, a lot of times when apps do have a big roster of languages, especially rare ones, it's usually they're not very good apps, or they don't have a good method of teaching. But like I said, we're using what we can find. But I think that's all I wanted to talk about with Uzbek. For listening, listening, it's going to come up to how much effort you want to put into it. A lot of the listening material you'll find on YouTube is going to be a little too, it's still listening material, even if it's just news and stuff. It's going to be hard, but something's better than nothing. But usually these languages, you're not going to find beginner listening material, even though that's very good. Sorry if I'm messing up my speech. I'm tired. It's past midnight, but yeah, like I said, you can go as far as you want to. You can hire people to, basically, record and write things for you to study with. I do remember one thing. So I'm also writing things in the language, that I want to learn. Like, big thing I like is reading simple stories in the languages. So I've been writing. I haven't started writing my own yet. I plan to after a while, but I've been finding things that I can you want to find things that obviously you have the rights to copy. You don't want to copyright infringe people, but finding things that you can translate from English into the language you're learning. Then you have beginner reading material. So if you can find material that you're able to translate, that's great. So there's something else I was going to say, but I forget. I've been talking for 22 minutes. But yeah, if y'all have questions in the comments, feel free to tell me. I'd like to know what y'all are wanting to learn. Maybe I can even help share some stuff. But hopefully you found this video helpful. I know it's kind of dragging on. I spent the first 8 minutes just talking a lot, but yeah, this is something I wanted to talk about, and I'll be talking more about it in the future as well. But I wanted to go ahead and record this. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you next time.